little bit less damage from your land, you know?
Yeah, he does have, I suppose he does get to play 4 Tectonic Edge in this list.
So Scavenging Ooze making an appearance on turn 3. Looks like Shaheen's going to try to Mana Leak that.
Yeah, so pair of Mana Leaks, I mean, so far so good for Shaheen, I would think at this point. They see Tech Edge as his 4th land.
Well, that's very much how a lot of these tap-out decks play, is they just use cards like Mana Leak or Spell Snare or even Path to Exile to buy them a little bit of time until they can start dropping their bombs. And this is where they get a little bit of advantage from people not knowing what they're playing. Because if you realized how much his hand is just going to be full of clunky main phase cards, you don't have to walk face first into his early interaction.
Yeah, and it's, you know, and that's one of the things, like, so if you're playing against this, you know that he's going to be playing, like, blue-white control-ish cards, right? You can put him on that, but there's, you know, there's more than a deck's worth of cards that he could theoretically be playing in this matchup.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of the common jokes that if people had to play 100 cards in this format, 100 card decks, yeah, you'd never even know if somebody's playing blue, white, red control or some kind of control deck, because there's so many cards that could be in any of the combo decks that are also in the control decks, like, you know, Mana Leaks and Vendilion Clicks and all sorts of things.
All right, so we see a Vendilion Click from Soorani. In response, Yarbrough is going to make a Deceiver Exarch. He's going to untap his own land, so he's fetching for all basics here off that Scalding Tarn. And eventually we're going to let this Vendilion Click resolve, but first it looks like it's going to eat a Lightning Bolt. Let's see, what was Yarbrough sitting on? Even though the Vendilion Click dies, the trigger will still resolve because it was put on the stack. And now we do get to see Yarbrough's hand, and it's Snapcaster Mage, Splinter Twin, and a Stomping Ground.
Chris has played against enough control decks. He knows you can't just be super greedy. You got to sometimes just play the value game. Just play out your creatures, play your threats. What he doesn't realize is that Shaheen's deck is a very, very main phase type of deck. And by playing that Deceiver now, he's going to be vulnerable to sweepers, to Detention Sphere, to all sorts of things that he wouldn't normally be.
Yeah, and this is, I think, where if you're Chris, you realize, hey, something's up. Turn 5 Detention Sphere from Shaheen Soorani takes care of Deceiver Exarch.
See, even Detention Sphere isn't the most out of the ordinary, but it is definitely an unusual, like, take notice, like you're saying. Like, that's sort of a, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's like, okay, I could see that. All right, we're going to see Chris try to rebuild resources. Snapcaster Mage will snap a Serum Visions.
It'll be interesting to see just how big of an impact Snapcaster Mage has on day 2. Going into this tournament, a lot of people are talking about this being Snapcaster Mage's weekend.
Yeah.
And so far, I can't say I think they're wrong. I mean, I think the only question is it Birthing Pod or Snapcaster Mage that is the loudest this weekend?
Yeah, and so one thing I'm noticing here is it seems to me, because Shaheen's deck is so heavy on board control, the tempo aspect of Tarmo Twin seems like that line is going to be difficult to win through. You know, we see Chris has he's been trying to make oozes, Tarmogoyfs. He's having trouble sticking any sort of redundant threat.
Yeah, I think I got to imagine that Shaheen's game 1 against regular Twin is kind of soft, but all of the extra cards in Tarmo Twin that are out of the ordinary are all real, playing right into Shaheen's game plan.
Yeah, so we see Chris finally does stick a Tarmogoyf to the board. He tapped out for that. Shaheen now will see if he has a response. He does have a Jace Bellerin at the ready, along with some other cards. Obviously, Jace doesn't take care of the board, but
it's amusing to me sometimes when you have Jace Bellerin and you're like, man, if I just had the standard version, if instead of like Elspeth Knight Errant and Jace Bellerin, what if I just had Jace Architect of Thought and Elspeth Sun's Champion?
Sun's Champion would be, I mean, right here, that'd be, if he had just 6th land, Elspeth Sun's Champion.
Elspeth Sun's Champion
would be really good right now, yeah.
Maybe that's the future of Modern. That card is hot.
All right, we have a swing from Chris. This is Snapcaster Mage and Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf is currently a 3/4. It is creature, instant, and land. And Vendilion Click will jump out of Shaheen's hand. We're wondering why he didn't play that Jace. Well, here's the answer. But it's not going to resolve. This is a Cryptic Command. He does not have the mana to cast that Cryptic Command, though, so it's going to go back in his hand.
Sorry about that. Hopefully we can get our Twitch chat back online so that people can let us know ASAP if he has the mana for it.
All right, the Vendilion Click will, so looks like it will not get countered. And He's actually clicking himself, so he puts the Jace Bellerin to the bottom.
Doesn't even care about the cryptic command.
No, yeah, it's funny because now he knew there was a cryptic command. He still opts to target himself.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Shaheen's going to play it straight up.
So Chris bolts the Vendilion Click. Or Chris bolts Shaheen's Vendilion Click, so no blockers. Shaheen's now contemplating if he wants to Path to Exile one of these creatures before damage, or he'll just take it. And it looks like he's just taking 5.
I mean, now that he realizes if he passed the Tarmogoyf. Oh, man.
A pretty timely draw there, yeah. Pretty glad he didn't pass now, because he draws Supreme Verdict and clears up the board again.
Yeah, he had a pretty good read on the future.
All right. Chris, not to be daunted, still going on the aggro plan. He end step play Snapcaster Mage, lightning bolting Shaheen down to 12.
That is basically how this weekend has gone. Just bolts to the dome.
Well, the thing is that Shaheen is 1 mana from starting to have Colonnade activations. So Chris, I feel like, has to push some damage quickly. We see he drops Shaheen to 10, and now he does hit that 3rd mana source for that final card, which both players know to be a cryptic command.
But Shaheen, with 2 Tectonic Edges in play, plenty of ways to turn it off.
Yeah, he can take Chris off that 3rd blue, and remember, he knows about cryptic command, so.
If Shaheen tries to destroy the Sulfur Falls during Chris's upkeep, even if Chris tries to cryptic to save it, the other Tectonic Edge can destroy it. And if it was a bounce draw, he won't even draw the card.
All right, Snapcaster Range. Yeah, that's something you touched on. When casting Cryptic Command, you have to be careful if you're choosing a mode with only 1 target. If you say to 1 target and draw, if they remove that target, your entire spell is countered, including the draw path. So Snapcaster is going to attack from Chris.
And Shaheen's going to snap call.
Yeah, he puts that Celestial Colonnade out. Both players know that it's Cryptic Command that's coming here. Or that I suppose that could be coming. Yeah, and we see Chris, there we go, grabbing all 3 of his blue mana sources. And it's a bounce, most likely a bounce draw. Interestingly enough, Chris's other card there is Flame Slash. So if he's willing to sacrifice the Snapcaster Mage, he could have just post-combat Flame Slashed the Colonnade. But looks like he's saying that the Cryptic is just too valuable to make a play like that.
Yeah, I think he wants the Snapcaster Mage putting a little more pressure down. He knows that Shaheen knows about the Cryptic, so he kind of wants to just get it out of his hand and get some new option.
What are the chances here that he's bouncing his Snapcaster Mage and drawing, and then post-combat going to Flame Slash the Colonnade? Okay,
unlikely.
Unlikely. All right, so he gets in for 2. That was a bounce. Looks like it was a bounce on the Colonnade, putting Shaheen to 8. Or maybe not to 8. Path to Exile takes out the Snapcaster Mage.
We're going to go see another island from Chris Yarbrough.
Yeah, that will mean that if he gets another Cryptic Command, they will be Tech Edge proof Cryptic Commands now. One of the things is I almost feel like it's going to be hard for Chris to realize a card out of that Flame Slash. There's very few targets in Shaheen's deck. Colonnade, I think, being the most obvious one. Colonnade is a slippery card to hit with Flame Slash.
Yeah, definitely. But here we see Shaheen replaying his Colonnade.
And Chris,
things are starting to fall apart for Chris.
Yeah, he lost his last creature. You see just another land there. He has 2 cards remaining in his hand. 1 is Flame Slash, 1 is Unknown. Shaheen, just going on the simple Colonnade plan, hits Chris down to 12.
This is one of those spots where Burst Lightning really looks good. And I know Flame Slash is the flavor of the week because of its ability to hit Spell Skite, but Flame Slash can hit, but Burst Lightning can hit the Spell Skite also. And there's just enough Celestial Colonnades. I really think it's worth considering mixing it up a little bit and getting at least 1 Burst Lightning into some of these Flame Slash decks.
Yeah, and I've even noticed that with the Flame Slash decks, he's only on 2 Flame Slashes. But you're right, the Flame Slash is efficient but narrow.
It's definitely much better when there's a creature-heavy metagame.
Yeah.
But what we've been seeing this weekend is an awful lot of combo decks and everything from pod decks. Well, first of all, obviously just mountains and mountains of pod decks and twin decks.
Right. Well, I mean, in that situation, Flame Slash should be okay, right? It's good against twin, and it's acceptable against pod, I would think.
So Chris is dropping another Snapcaster Mage.
Right. This is with an attack, and it's gonna get spell snared off that Colonnade.
So is this before attackers have been declared?
This is. I'm not sure. We're somewhere in combat. Well, the spell snare is gonna get remanded. So it looks like the Snapcaster is going to get to resolve. This is a pretty timely remand from Yarbrough.
Oh, absolutely. The question is, does he remand the Spell Snare or does he remand the Snapcaster Mage? Because if he remands the Snapcaster Mage, he gets to draw the extra card, have the Snapcaster Mage, and the Spell Snare will be out of Shaheen's hand.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there. I would prefer to remand the Snapcaster Mage.
Now, it seems like they're having a discussion about whether or not this is before combat or after the Colonnade has already attacked.
Now he's going to remand this. Yeah, so it hasn't attacked yet, which means that tap means it won't be able to attack. The Spell Snare is remanded. Cryptic Command is flashed back, bouncing the Colonnade and drawing a card. And it might be that he needs to make that play simply because, like, yeah, there's actually only so much damage he can take. You know, Colonnade's a decent racing card. And Chris back on the attack, though, puts Shaheen down to 8. Now 11 to 8. Chris is in the lead. And Tarmogoyf joins the battlefield. Now up to a 4/5 Tarmogoyf, thanks to the inclusion of sorcery.
Yeah, it's games like this that show why Shaheen just doesn't need card draw for the way he wants to play the game. He just wants to spend his mana doing things like bashing people with Colonnades, playing Supreme Verdicts. If it comes to it, maybe some Planeswalkers. He does not need a bunch of cards. He wants to hit hard with the few he has.
Yeah, and it seems like if Shaheen can cast all the cards in his hand, he looks like he's pretty good to win. We do see there was a Snapcaster Mage on Supreme Verdict for Soorani. He took care of both creatures. And the rest of his hand pretty loaded. We see Path to Exile, Cryptic Command, both waiting in his hand. He made a second Colonnade there.
So he replayed the Colonnade last turn before after combat. Is that correct?
Yes, he replayed it. Yeah, he has 2 Colonnades now, actually.
Shaheen's life total dropping low enough that we might be looking at a couple of bolts to finish the job here.
Yep.
What's interesting is that Shaheen does not actually have very many ways to stop the combo at all, though. If Chris ever does find a Kiki-Jiki or a Twin, he'll probably win on the spot.
Yeah, I believe Shaheen has 1 Path to Exile waiting in his hand, so I think he's protected here. Yeah, we're going to see him actually just use the Path on the Exarch.
Well, yeah, at this point, he just wants to not get double bolted out.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, 6 and 7 are very different numbers. And a shuffle from Yarbrough, but no basics. That is all the basics out of his deck. 3 island, 1 mountain, 1 forest. He plays 5 basics. They are all in play. You can see the draw was, it looks like he drew Pestermite for the turn.
Definitely.
So Pestermite, and so his hand is Pestermite and still that Flame Slash. And Shaheen is ever the control player here. It looks like he's just passing back. So he's opting not to hit with Colonnades right now, despite the fact that Chris is at 10. He has drawn a second Cryptic Command. And it seems like there's just no rush for Shaheen at this point. You know, he's kind of, as the control deck, it feels like he's turned a corner here. You know, he has a lot of hard counters.
Well, he wants to get a little bit more mana, something else going, you know, either a threat that doesn't require his mana or drawing a little bit more mana. Chris, meanwhile, just drew a Splinter Twin, which means that if Shaheen gets greedy and tries to attack, he'll die immediately.
Yeah, so Shaheen actually uses a Cryptic there to bounce Chris's land and draw a card. And Pestermite made from Yarbrough. That play from Shaheen does, all right. We see Snapcaster Path on the Pestermite. I was gonna say that play took down Cryptic mana, so the Pestermite was able to sneak in, because we see there's still the he still has the removal spell for Pestermite. And a Serum Visions from Soorani. This looks like it's gonna be hard for Yarbrough to break through.
Oh, how far we've come that Shaheen is casting Serum Visions. He's right, he's not playing Preordain, but he is playing Serum Visions.
Right.
Interesting.
It's true, he wasn't a big fan of Preordain, was he?
No, I think sometimes it's better to just draw the card, scry later, you know?
Yeah, it's
No. Chris, at this point, finally makes use of that Flame Slash.
Shaheen with the repeal on Snapcaster in response. Chris will have none of that. He's going to bolt it.
Yeah, he didn't want to have to use the bolt that way, but
Yeah, Shaheen was at 7.
The tough thing here is that, I mean, he's on a 2-turn clock if Shaheen swings.
He's on a 2-turn clock if Shaheen swings. Shaheen also just drew Gideon Jura for the turn, which he has the mana to cast while leaving up Cryptic, I believe.
Well, yeah, but if he attacks with the Colonnade now, he can also leave up Cryptic and have him on a 1-turn clock.
And that is indeed the play he will make, as Colonnade will put Yarbrough down to 4. And with the Splinter Twin, just a twin in play, I think he has, we'll see if he has an Exarch or anything of the sort. Shaheen will go for the win here, and that'll be game 1 for Shaheen Soorani.
So what's Shaheen got in the sideboard for such a matchup?
Well, it looks like in his sideboard he has almost devoted his entire sideboard to combo hate. He has Meddling Mage, Canonist, Mind Sensor, Stony Silence, Grafdigger's Cage, Rest in Peace. So he only has, most of his cards are just for that purpose. He's actually playing 1 Last Breath on the sideboard, which is good against both Pestermite and Deceiver Exarch. I wouldn't be surprised to see him actually bring that in.
Oh, yeah.
And Kiki Jiki.
Yeah, my guess is that most of these cards aren't going to do anything but the 1 Last Breath and then possibly 3 Meddling Mages. It's not great, but if he just has any dead cards, at least he can bring in the Meddling Mage and it's something.
Yeah, that's something. Here's a card which I want to just comment on the board. He's playing 2 Baneslayer Angels out of the sideboard.
You're right. Normally, Baneslayer Angel wouldn't be what you want against a combo deck, but Shaheen's also informed enough to realize that a lot of these Turbo Twin decks board out some of their combo and rely more heavily on creatures. Baneslayer Angel doesn't do a bad job in the creature matchups.
No, Baneslayer Angel's incredible there. Now, I want to go to Chris's sideboard because typically a Tarmo Twin deck would, against control, would become more of a Tarmo deck and less of a Twin deck. But I almost feel like if Chris knew Shaheen's deck list, he'd want to stay a Twin deck.
Yeah, I mean, the twin aspect is so good against Shaheen for the and Shaheen surprisingly is not actually going to board that much here. He's got to guess though that Shaheen's going to have a bunch of stuff because most of these blue-white players will have stuff like Ghostly Prison or Suppression Field or Torpor Orb or Blind Obedience, something to lock out the twin combo because it's the most popular one.
Right, so it's like, I wonder, like, say if you look at blue-white red control, I know that Tarmo Twin doesn't try to twin them very much after sideboard. So this is interesting. I think if he had perfect information, the correct play is for Chris to stay with the twin combo. But let's look, what are some of the plans he can do here?
Most likely he's going to bring in Combust and Dismember, because largely because he has a lot of dead cards anyway, and Combust and Dismember can interact with the Celestial Colonnade, which is how he saw himself lose that game. Beyond that, Sword of Feast and Famine and Batterskull are both top-notch anti-control cards that they don't require that big of an investment to give you a very powerful dimension to your strategy. He's going to want Dispel just as another efficient anti-cryptic command card. And then finally, I think he's actually going to consider Nature's Claim because of its ability to interact with Detention Sphere. He's going to assume that Shaheen has something like Torpor Orb or Blind Obedience, Suppression Field, or Ghostly Prison, which he doesn't, but he does have Detention Sphere at the very least, and Chris just honestly has a lot of relatively weak cards game 1, which is why I think he's not even going to cut the combo. I think here he's going to cut things like Threads of Disloyalty, Flame Slash. He's going to trim down and stuff like that, even Lightning Bolt. So I think that he's not actually going to cut any of the combo. I think he's just going to cut 7 removal spells if he can. 4 Lightning Bolts, a Threads, and 2 Flame Slash.
So another thing that Chris has, he has some offensive counter magic. I'm looking at a Spell Snare, a counter, or sorry, that's a Spell Skite. That may not, okay. But he has a Counterflux and a Dispel.
Yes, the Counterflux would be great.
The Counterflux is great.
Dispel
is probably pretty good too.
Yep.
So yeah, post-board it looks like he's able to board those in. But
I think that even the Scavenging Ooze in his sideboard might come in just as being a live card.
Yeah, it's better than Flame Slashes. It's better than Electrolyze. It's maybe not better than Electrolyze. I don't know.
Yeah, at the very least, though, 2 counter spells, 2 removal spells in the form of Combust and Dismember, a Scavenging Ooze, a Batterskull, and a Sword of Feast and Famine, probably coming in for the 7 removal spells.
So that's an interesting thing, that Sword of Feast and Famine comes in against a blue-white control deck. The 2 protection colors on it are neither black nor green is relevant. Is that You know, I kind of am wondering the spot it fills in the metagame. Like, it's just the activated ability you're looking for, or is the, you know, it seems like it would be good against a Jund deck.
Historically, the swords
Yeah.
have mostly been about their abilities, not the protection colors. I mean, it's not that bad, but the protection colors are relevant to some degree. There's generally been two different types of protection colors: protection from white or anything else.
Sure.
But the Sword of Feast and Famine, quite good when it makes your guy able to block Tarmogoyf. But for the most part, you're playing it because it's a way to make them discard a card every turn while untapping all your mana, giving you card advantage and mana advantage. It also makes any of your random, 1/4s and 2/1s into serious game-winning threats.
Yeah. All the swords just really efficient equipment in that regard, turning any creature kind of into a must answer, really. Chris looks like a quick mulligan on his side.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that more people don't play swords in Modern. I think the best of them is definitely Sword of Feast and Famine in general, but there are several that, I mean, basically at least 4 of them are legitimate Modern cards.
Yeah.
Sword of Feast and Famine is the default because of its overall power level, giving you the card and mana advantage as we talked about. But Sword of Light and Shadow gets played some because the protection colors are the 2 most desired, and it generates a board advantage in the form, like the life gain, giving you a little bit of time and some extra cards, which can create inevitability.
Now,
Sword of Fire and Ice, obviously, completely dominating a board and giving you, advantage. And then finally, Sword of War and Peace, if you just want to hit somebody the hardest you possibly can.
yeah. So what about, so our blue-green one is left out in the cold here.
Man, I haven't seen anybody really cast a blue-green sword since Paul Rietzel ran me out of cards with his Burrows deck in Paris. Yeah, Sword of Feast and Sword of Body and Mind, probably the 5th out of that group, but a pretty strong group nonetheless.
Yeah, I know. I'm interested to hear you say that Feast and Famine is probably the best position one. I had always, Fire Ice has always stuck out to me as like the most powerful of the swords, but I suppose in Control Mirrors, Feast and Famine really does the job better.
So sort of Feast and Famine making them discard a card is only slightly worse than sort of Fire and Ice letting you draw a card.
Sure.
However, the ability to add several Black Lotuses to your mana pool is generally better than shocking something. And it's tough because it's not always worth it. You end up wasting that mana a lot. But in general, the ability to untap all your mana in a format with things like Cryptic Command and Snapcaster Mage, it's just fantastic.
All right, well, we have a 6-on-6 here. Both players mulliganed, but quickly kept their 6. Yarbrough on the play he's down a game against Shaheen Soorani here. And we are seeing him start off with what I assume, again, is going to be a Serum Visions.
Yeah, if he's going to all the trouble of keeping his land untapped on turn 1, that's most likely Serum Visions. It's always interesting to me the way that the percentages change when both players sideboard. Right now in Modern, I think whoever's on the play generally wins right around 52-53% of the time. But when both players mulligan, I think that the person on the draw actually has a slight advantage and wins around 50-51% of the time.
Sure. And that sort of thing, that's in Modern, right? Because I know that can be format dependent.
Very much so.
Yeah. I want to say that as we get into more powerful formats, being on the play matters even more. Like, for example, the die roll in Legacy is very important. You see in like some block formats, even the die roll being almost even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it varies a lot, but it has to do with how much does that tempo advantage matter compared to the extra card. In formats where the cards are expensive enough, slow enough, the extra 1 mana you give somebody isn't even that big of a deal. But in a format like Vintage, for instance, 1 extra mana could mean 3 extra cards.
Yeah. So both players developing their mana bases, making 2 lands. No one has started the battle yet. And Yarbrough isn't going to be the first one to start. He makes a 3rd land tapped and passes. This is playing, I would think, right into what Shaheen wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if there is no big threat putting any pressure on him early on, that's, step 1. Step 2, Shaheen knows Chris's list. Chris doesn't know Shaheen's.
Yeah, and here's a big one. Chris missing his 4th land drop. He was forced to just pass the turn. And it's actually going to be Shaheen Soorani with the first play of the game. And that's not the role that Chris wanted to have in this matchup.
No, and it's tough here too because Shaheen's going to be able to make 2 plays in the same turn with Meddling Mage coming down, forcing Chris's hand, and then backing it up with a Mana Leak.
Yeah, as you see, in response to the mage, Chris is going to go ahead and fetch. I imagine he's going to make a 3-mana card.
Deceiver, Exarch, or Pestermite is the most likely.
Whichever one he goes with, I'm guessing it's just going to eat a Mana Leak. He's actually going to go ahead and remand
thinning his deck
mage
beforehand.
And Shaheen will have none of that. He opts to Mana Leak the remand.
And what do you name here?
Well, that's interesting. So I'm not sure. Cryptic command. What about just saying cryptic?
So he does name Lightning Bolt. The tough thing is he doesn't want to turn off his own cryptic commands.
Oh, right, because Meddling Mage is reciprocal.
Yeah. But he does name Lightning Bolt specifically so that you can't Lightning Bolt the Meddling Mage. The tough thing, though, is I'm not convinced Chris has any Lightning Bolts in his deck. Although, from the looks of it, he has both Lightning Bolt and Flame Slash in his hand. Jeez.
I am interested that we see a Game 2 Flame Slash, considering the role it played Game 1. Well, it wasn't very good Game 1, but actually Game 2, the card, it got its full value as it takes out the Meddling Mage. And sort of feast and famine for Yarbrough, but that's going to be shut down by a turn 5 Gideon Jura on Shaheen's side.
It's interesting. Both players get to do their plans. We have Gideon versus Sword of Feast and Famine. Who will win?
That's a fight that I feel like historically Gideon has been very good at.
Yes, the Sword of Feast and Famine does not trigger when it hits Gideon.
All right, well, Chris finally has a creature to put that sword on. That creature is going to be Scavenging Ooze. But he's going to need a way to get that Gideon off the board. Otherwise, Gideon will taunt the Ooze, make it attack, and then could kill the Ooze on the next turn. Or could just keep taunting it.
Chris choosing to save mana for the Scavenging Ooze rather than equip it with the sword.
All right, Meddling Mage is eaten by the Ooze, so Ooze goes up to a 3/3. That manages to get the rare creature out of Shaheen's graveyard. Now, Gideon to me, this to me is like one of those forgotten cards. It's like, I remember playing with Gideon in Standard where he was just a complete powerhouse. And we play Modern and we don't see him much, but when we see a game where he's cast like this, I'm reminded like, this card is really powerful.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, as it is now, he only appears a little bit in various control decks, sometimes as a one-of, but at the Pro Tour, it's sort of made a resurgence with players like Gabriel Nassif and quite a number of the blue-white-red control players all experimenting with, you know, maybe we can move this in a little bit. It's a really strong anti-aggro card that actually can disrupt a few of the combo decks.
It's anti-twin, for example. If you consider Affinity to be a combo deck, you know, it buys you a turn against Affinity, for example.
The main advantage to Gideon, though, is that when people are on backup plans, Gideon is one of the greatest there is against bashing fair games, you know?
Yeah, and we're seeing that right now. You know, Chris is playing this tempo plan, and Gideon will have none of that. He's, you know, he'll just plus, and Shaheen will stay at 19.
Gideon is not a super realistic card when you have to play games that are kind of glorified sealed deck games.
All right, well, we're going to see a Cryptic Command attempting to bounce Gideon Jura, and that'll get Cryptic back. What I like is that Gideon... So, Tarmotun's like this aggro control deck, which is typically pretty good against control, but Gideon has forced Chris to be the first one to make a move, which puts him in the matchup he doesn't want to be in.
Yeah, missing that land drop was big. I mean, it gave Shaheen a chance to kind of get it into the driver's seat, where now he has the Meddling Mage and Mana Leak in the same turn. Then he sticks Gideon when Chris has no way to stop it. And now we see, even though Chris has several things going for him, none of them can compare to Gideon.
Yeah, that sort of Feast and Famine, for example, a great anti-control card, but not relevant on this board. So you see, Gideon was able to make the Scavenging Ooze attack it, and now it's going to go ahead and try to, it's destroying the tapped Ooze. And still has 5 counters left. Is nowhere close to dead. Some things, Gideon is just extraordinarily loyal. So when your removal spells are things like Burn, you know, you hope that it only is a 2-for-1 when you get rid of Gideon.
Amusingly, Shaheen does have to be a little careful here. If he just sends Gideon into the red zone, there's the possibility of it getting tapped by Pestermite or Deceiver Exarch, and or even having his mana tapped and the combo going off. Whereas if he keeps plussing Gideon, he's not actually vulnerable to the combo at all.
Yeah. A little cute play there by Yarbrough. That was a cycle. He cast a lightning bolt at Gideon and then remanded his own lightning bolt.
Thought better of it.
Yeah. That's one of the things that actually you're saying, I think one of the tricks to playing with Gideon is oftentimes you just plus the Gideon for like almost forever. We see Shaheen here is going to deal 6. Because Yarbrough doesn't have the 3 mana up for the twin combo, this seems pretty safe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at a spot like this, he's got Chris on a real short clock when he has a turn where he knows nothing can go wrong. But even in this spot, it looks like he has at least Path to Exile. It's going to be real tough for Chris to get out from underneath this Gideon.
Yeah, and I say his price here, Shaheen has a second Gideon in his hand if something happens to this one.
And that's the game.
All right, so Shaheen, yeah, hand full of answers. Another Gideon, 2 Paths to Exiles, a Detention Sphere. Shaheen Soorani moves to 10-1, playing blue-white tap-out control.